Everyone thinks this is just another royal courtroom drama, another headline to scroll past, another argument between a prince and a newspaper. But look closer, and you see something far more revealing. You see a man standing in the wreckage of his own story, trying to convince a judge, a country, and himself that he is still the hero of it. When Prince Harry walked into that London courtroom, he did not just bring lawyers and documents. He brought years of resentment, half-healed trauma, public confessions, and a narrative he has been telling the world since he left the palace. A narrative where he is always under attack, always misunderstood, always fighting invisible enemies. For a long time, people believed that story. They remembered the boy behind his mother's coffin. They remembered the shy soldier in Afghanistan. They remembered the prince who seemed different from the rest. So when he said the tabloids destroyed his life, many were ready to listen. But courtrooms are not theaters for emotional monologues. They are places where stories are tested, dissected, and sometimes dismantled. And that is exactly what is happening now. Because once the lawyers started asking questions, cracks appeared. Journalists he accused of stalking him pointed out that he had invited them into his social circle. Emails that were meant to prove conspiracy began to look like routine reporting. Relationships he blamed on media pressure suddenly had other explanations. Slowly, painfully, the simple good versus evil tale began to collapse into something far more uncomfortable, a messy web of cooperation, conflict, and contradiction. This is why this case feels different. It is not just Harry versus the Daily Mail. It is Harry versus his own past choices. He spent years engaging with the media when it suited him. He benefited from attention when it boosted his image. He stayed silent when palace rules demanded it. And later, he spoke loudly when personal branding made it profitable. Now he wants the court to see only one side of that history. The problem is, the record shows more than that. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the world has changed. People are worried about rent, food prices, healthcare, and job security. They are tired. They are skeptical. So when they see a wealthy prince flying in from California to relive battles from 20 years ago, sympathy does not come easily. Instead of seeing a brave whistleblower, many see someone who cannot let go. And that is the real tragedy here, because buried under the anger and lawsuits is a man who once had enormous public goodwill, a man who could have been a bridge between tradition and modernity, a man who could have reshaped the monarchy from within or beyond it. Instead, he is trapped in endless conflict, replaying old wounds on the biggest stage possible, hoping that this time, finally, the world will agree with him, and wondering whether this battle will ever end or if it is destined to consume everything around him. For a moment, try to imagine what it must feel like to sit in that witness box, knowing every word you say will be analyzed, replayed, and judged, not just by lawyers, but by millions of strangers. Harry is not just defending a lawsuit, he is defending an identity he has spent years building. The brave truth-teller, the wounded son, the rebel prince who escaped a toxic system. That image is now on trial alongside him. Because once you step into a courtroom, emotion loses its power. Sympathy becomes secondary. What matters is consistency, evidence, logic, timelines. And this is where Harry's story begins to wobble. For years, he has insisted that the press hunted him relentlessly, that journalists operated like criminals, that every relationship and every heartbreak was engineered by intrusion. But now lawyers are presenting emails, invitations, and social interactions that suggest something else, not pure persecution, participation. He talked to reporters. He attended events where journalists were present. He maintained professional relationships. He sometimes benefited from positive coverage. That does not mean he was never mistreated. It means the relationship was complicated. And complexity is dangerous when your entire public brand is built on simplicity. The narrative he wants is clear: innocent prince versus ruthless media machine. The reality emerging in court is blurrier: a young royal learning how to use attention, a palace managing information strategically, a celebrity navigating fame with mixed success. None of that fits neatly into a victim story. And then there is Meghan. Her presence and her absence hover over everything. In documentaries and interviews, they presented themselves as inseparable, a united front against the world, two warriors fighting the same enemy. But in court, Harry stands alone. No hand to hold, no supportive glance, no symbolic solidarity, just empty space where many expected to see his partner. That silence speaks loudly. It suggests strategy, distance, risk management. It hints that even inside their partnership, this battle may not be equally owned, and that makes Harry look even more isolated, a man fighting yesterday's wars while tomorrow quietly moves on without him. Public perception is shifting because people are noticing these contradictions: privacy versus publicity, pain versus profit, trauma versus branding. He condemns intrusion while selling intimate memories. He demands silence while producing content. He attacks tabloids while feeding them material. Each contradiction chips away at trust. And once trust weakens, everything else follows. Viewers stop listening with empathy. They start listening with skepticism. Every claim is questioned. Every emotion is scrutinized. Every tear is weighed against a Netflix deal. The courtroom exposes this in brutal detail. There are no edits, no dramatic music, no carefully crafted monologues, just questions and answers, and each answer pulls him further away from the version of himself he wants the world to see. What remains is a man caught between who he was, who he tried to become, and who the public now believes he is. And that gap is growing wider with every day this trial continues. What makes this situation even more painful is that Harry's fight is rooted in something real. The press did hound his mother. Cameras did chase her through tunnels. Headlines did turn private suffering into public spectacle. That history is not imaginary. It is burned into public memory and into Harry's own childhood. So when he says he fears the media, when he says he feels hunted, when he says he wants to protect his family, many people understand exactly where that comes from. But pain does not automatically make someone right. Trauma explains behavior. It does not excuse every decision that follows. And over time, Harry's response to that trauma has hardened into something else. Not just caution, not just boundaries, but obsession. A need to fight, to prove, to punish, to rewrite. Every lawsuit becomes a symbolic battle against his past. Every journalist becomes a stand-in for old ghosts. Every headline feels like a personal attack. And instead of healing, he keeps reopening the wound. That is why these cases never seem to bring closure. Even when he wins partial victories, nothing changes. The anger remains, the distrust remains, the sense of being wronged remains. It is like trying to put out a fire by throwing paper on it. The flames only grow. Meanwhile, the world around him keeps moving. Younger generations are less impressed by titles. Social media has democratized fame. Influence now comes from authenticity, not lineage. People want transparency, not grievances. They want solutions, not vendettas. And Harry's constant return to old battles feels outdated in a culture that rewards forward momentum. Look at the contrast. On one side, you have charities, veterans programs, mental health initiatives, projects that genuinely help people. When Harry focuses on those, he shines. He seems grounded, purposeful, relevant. On the other side, you have lawsuits, memoirs, interviews, accusations, and feuds. When he focuses on those, he looks small, defensive, bitter. Sadly, the second side has dominated his life in recent years. And courts are unforgiving mirrors. They reflect not just facts, but patterns. A pattern of conflict, a pattern of escalation, a pattern of framing every disagreement as persecution. Judges see that. Lawyers exploit that. The public notices that. Even his emotional moments in court, when his voice cracks or his eyes well up, do not land the way they once might have. Instead of compassion, they trigger discomfort. People wonder, is this pain or performance? Is this grief or strategy? Is this vulnerability or branding? That doubt is devastating, because once people start questioning sincerity, every message weakens, every cause loses power, every appeal sounds hollow. Harry is not losing because he is lying. He is losing because he has told his story too many times, in too many ways, for too many reasons. The repetition has drained it of magic. What was once raw now feels rehearsed. And in that transformation, something precious has been lost. What is perhaps most striking is how this long war with the media has slowly reshaped Harry's entire identity. Once, he was known as the fun-loving prince, the relatable royal, the soldier who laughed easily and connected naturally with people. Now, he is increasingly defined by court filings, legal strategies, and public grievances. His name is no longer associated first with service or charity, but with conflict. And that is not an accident. It is the result of years of choosing confrontation over recalibration. Every public figure faces criticism. Every powerful family deals with leaks and rumors. Every celebrity learns, sooner or later, that privacy is limited. The difference lies in how they adapt. Some learn to disengage. Some learn to set boundaries quietly. Some learn to starve controversy of oxygen. Harry chose a different path. He chose to fight everything, to challenge every narrative, to correct every perceived injustice. At first, that seemed courageous. It felt like rebellion against an unfair system. But over time, it began to look exhausting, not just for him, but for everyone watching. Because constant warfare leaves no room for growth. When you are always battling enemies, you stop building allies. When you are always defending your past, you neglect your future. When you are always explaining yourself, you never fully become someone new. This is why his post-royal life feels strangely stalled. Despite wealth, freedom, and global visibility, he seems stuck in a loop. Lawsuit, interview, documentary, memoir, reaction, repeat. Each cycle promises closure, none delivers it. The Courtroom dramatizes this stagnation. It shows a man replaying events from 20 years ago in painstaking detail, hoping that a judge's ruling will finally validate his emotional truth. But legal victories do not heal psychological wounds. They never have. They never will. And deep down, Harry seems to know this. That is what makes his persistence so heartbreaking. It looks less like confidence and more like desperation, less like strength and more like fear. Fear that if he stops fighting, the story will be written without him. Fear that if he lets go, his pain will lose meaning. Fear that without this battle, he will have to face quieter, harder questions about himself. Questions like, who am I without this conflict? What do I stand for now? What legacy am I building? So far, the answers have been unclear. The absence of strong advisors only makes things worse. Good counsel does not just tell you how to win, it tells you when to walk away. It tells you when a battle is damaging your credibility. It tells you when pride is costing more than it is worth. If Harry has people giving him that advice, he does not seem to be listening. Instead, he doubles down. He invests more energy. He sharpens his accusations. He raises the stakes. And each time, the outcome disappoints. The tragedy is not that he may lose this case. The tragedy is that even if he wins parts of it, nothing fundamental will change. The anger will still be there. The distrust will still be there. The loneliness will still be there. Victory, in this context, would be hollow. And slowly, painfully, that reality is becoming impossible to ignore. In the end, this story is not really about tabloids or lawsuits or leaked emails. It is about a man who has spent most of his adult life trying to outrun his own shadow, a shadow shaped by tragedy, privilege, expectation, and loss. A shadow that follows him into courtrooms, interviews, and documentaries, no matter how far he travels. Harry believed that leaving the royal system would set him free, free from control, free from silence, free from manipulation. And in some ways, it did. He gained the right to speak, to choose, to profit from his story. But freedom also brought responsibility. Responsibility for tone, for timing, for balance, for restraint. And that is where things began to unravel. Because instead of using his voice to close chapters, he used it to reopen them. Instead of redefining himself, he kept reintroducing old versions of his pain. Instead of building something lasting, he kept reacting to what hurt him. The public has noticed. Slowly, quietly, sympathy has shifted into fatigue. Not hatred, not cruelty, just exhaustion. People are tired of hearing the same grievances wrapped in different packaging. They are tired of seeing every setback framed as betrayal. They are tired of watching potential dissolve into bitterness. What makes this especially sad is that Harry still has the tools to change course. He has influence, he has resources, he has experience. He has lived through things most people never will. He understands loss, pressure, and vulnerability in a deeply personal way. Those qualities could make him a powerful advocate, a meaningful leader, a bridge between worlds, but only if he lets go of the fight. Letting go does not mean forgiving everything. It does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means choosing peace over proof. It means deciding that your future matters more than your past. It means understanding that not every wound needs a courtroom and not every injustice needs a microphone. Right now, Harry seems unable to make that choice. He is still trying to win arguments that no longer matter. He is still trying to convince people who have already moved on. He is still trying to control a narrative that has slipped beyond his reach. And that is why this courtroom battle feels like a turning point, not because of the verdict, but because of what it symbolizes. It represents the end of an era where his story was automatically believed. It marks the moment when evidence began to outweigh emotion. It signals that the world is no longer listening with unconditional empathy. What happens next depends on him. He can continue down this path, collecting partial victories and full disappointments, surrounded by lawyers and headlines, trapped in cycles of resentment, or he can step back, reassess, and rebuild his life around something quieter, steadier, and more meaningful. The first option is familiar, the second is frightening, but it is also the only one that leads to growth. For years, Harry has been fighting ghosts. Now he stands at a crossroads. One road leads deeper into conflict, the other leads toward acceptance. History will remember which one he chooses.